Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. I have with me Ed and Nathan.
Hello.
How's everybody doing?
We're good.
We're good?
Everybody's
Doing really
good.
Yeah.
Well. We had a little bit of a break in our shooting, but we are back.
We are.
They don't know that because we still had a podcast every week.
It's the
Yeah,
real
they don't know.
inside baseball right
It
here
is
for
right
everybody.
And talking about baseball, this is the start of the World Series the day we're filming.
Yeah, and I
this
thought
will
it-
be shown. We'll already know that the Braves have won.
Well,
yeah, there you go.
Cut. We're sorry the Braves lost.
I was going to say,
Really disappointed.
We can do some predictions now because we don't know, but when this drops, they might know.
Oh, they will know, right?
They would have to know about it.
What's the date of this?
This is dropping on November the 3rd.
Oh, they may not
Yeah,
know.
they may not know.
They may
That's
not.
right. We,
Keep going, Braves. Oh, it's too bad.
unless we've lost.
One of those two.
Swept.
Oh, that would really suck.
That was really bad.
Yeah.
So Kyle Wright pitched.
Oh, don't start that. Who? That's what everybody's saying.
That's what everybody's
Who?
saying.
He made the roster. We don't know why yet.
Or they'll go, how did he know?
I know. Snick got lucky the other night though.
Well,
That
yeah.
one pinch hit call he made.
Yeah. It was,
Again,
it was a big one.
Inside baseball. Nobody
It
cares.
was
Well,
a
it's
big
not
one.
just inside baseball. It's inside ancient baseball at this point when they're watching. The other night, 4 weeks ago?
It is. So
Too bad Snit got fired. Or he won manager of the whatever. I don't know.
maybe. We'll find out. So, past our Braves fandom, today we have 2 questions
Yep.
sent to us by our faithful listeners. And we're going to, in fact,
Not a non-faithful one. They just were clicking around on links.
if you click the button and give a question, you are faithful.
You are one of our favorite people.
That's
You
all
should have
it
given us a
takes.
name.
That's all it
you
takes.
gave us content, so thank you.
But in fact, I believe the next 3 weeks are going to be question heavy.
Hey.
We got
Question heavy.
we got lots of questions to get to. So if you tune in over the next 3 weeks, you're going to hear all of those
all
answers.
questions from faithful listeners.
Yes.
True.
Faithful enough.
This
to
one
ask
came from a
questions.
person named Tim.
No, Ed. We don't know their name. Don't lie to the people.
Okay.
Don't make up stuff.
All right.
We're nothing if we're not truthful here.
All right. We're nothing.
They were nothing. Yep,
That's why I said that.
I don't know why you would set us up for that.
Some folks out there went, "Yep, he is right." All right, first question. I'm in a discipleship group, so I read through the God.
Congratulations.
Yeah, good for you. Great job.
That sounded sarcastic, but it wasn't.
wasn't.
I just want you to know
that-
we sounded very sarcastic. Congratulations! Let's give him an award.
We are
But we
happy.
actually mean it. We're very happy that
We
you're in a
are.
So
discipleship group.
happy.
We're so
are.
used to being sarcastic. Everything we say, I love you, honey. Sounds sarcastic. We're terrible.
All right, here we go.
Here we
I'm
go.
going to try this again. I'm in a discipleship group, so
You mean we didn't cut all that previous stuff? all that's going to actually happen?
somebody send me help. First question. I'm in a discipleship group, so I read through the Gospels regularly. Every time I read Matthew 24, I get confused. The confusing part is where Jesus says, I tell you the truth. This generation will not pass from the scene until all these things take place. I've always heard this chapter being taught as about the end times and the return of Jesus and the wars and rumors of wars, etc. passage. Was Jesus guessing, or is there some secret meaning to the words this generation, and maybe they mean something else? I think this falls right in line with what we've had the discussion about for the past several weeks of how to read the Bible, how not to read the Bible.
Yeah.
So we're going to probably employ a lot of those skills that we talked to you guys about to make some sense out of this passage. But I will say, first of all, you're not the first one to ask me this question.
Oh, no.
A
I
lot
think
of
it's
people.
the first time we've had a very similar question
Had a
on
similar
this
question.
podcast. We may
We
want to
have.
link that in case you want additional to our answers, or you'll find
Now-
out we're going to say the exact same thing.
Now, Nathan, you're making me go back and do some work and
Okay,
find the
sorry,
old
I was
clip.
about to
But
say. But I do think we have a
Yes.
very similar answer on the podcast. So
Well,
it's a
I
very
know for
common
sure
question.
My discipleship group also just read this question, and somebody in my discipleship group asked me this question.
There you
Oh.
go. And they didn't like your answer, so they went to the
They didn't
podcast.
realize I was going to be on
see
this.
if me and Nathan can straighten him out.
That's right. All right.
Probably.
Well, then I'm going to be quiet and let y'all give a shot, and I'll go.
I just think I think Jason should answer. You get started, Jason.
All right, I'll start by saying this. As we've been saying, when you read a passage of Scripture, your number one friend is context.
Yep.
Context, context, context. And so what I always encourage people to do is go back and read what happened before and read everything in its context. And what you're going to find in this passage of Scripture is what happens is Jesus and the disciples are walking into the temple area. They're walking around the temple area. And the disciples make a comment about what a beautiful place this is. They kind of remark about all the building and the craftsmanship and what a wonderful temple we have built here as Israelites here in Jerusalem.
I imagine it like all other country boys. You know,
Yep.
they're from Galilee,
That's
lots
right.
of them, and they
That's
come
right.
to the big city and they
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
see this beautiful, huge building. They're like, oh my, look
Yeah.
at this beautiful building.
And just to give you, again, some more context, people didn't just all go to the temple every Sunday
No,
or every
that's right.
Saturday for them. It wasn't a normal thing. This was a special kind of deal they were doing, and it probably something that was a special occasion for them,
Right.
In that part of their life. So they're making all these comments, and then Jesus just pipes in and makes a little, I vision sometimes almost a little bit of a snarky kind of thing, or just it's almost like he says, good thing you're enjoying this, because in not too long from now, this whole place is coming down, and not one stone is going to be left on another.
And then I imagine them going, ha, ha, ha.
What? Yeah. And it just blew their minds. And so then there's a little bit of pause in the dialogue a little bit, and if I remember it correctly, and then they come back to it later and they say, Jesus, now we hear what you said, that the temple's going to be destroyed. Really? And if it's going to happen, when are all these things going to take place?
Right.
Right.
Okay, all of that I just said is the context for what Jesus then says from that point on.
That's
Right.
right.
And
So-
that leads to him saying, this generation
yeah.
will not pass before they
If
see
I'm
it.
not mistaken, they ask him two questions. When will these things that you just said take
Yes.
place? And what will be the sign of
signs.
your return?
Right.
Yes.
So there are, in fact, two questions and two answers.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of people get them confused, because Jesus does go about answering both of those questions in different ways.
Yeah, and the first one is really clear, and when they saw it happen, the history tells us the Christians knew Jesus had told them it was going to happen.
Right.
Yes.
And another scripture, he says, when this happens, you should flee the city, and pregnant women will be glad to get out of the city. That may be in this. I think that's in Mark, but
Yeah.
it might be here.
Yeah.
It might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
One of the ones says, and they said when this began to happen, when the Romans surrounded the city, Christians, in fact, did leave, and they weren't trapped like the rest of the people were, which is why Jesus predicted it for them.
Yes. And we also know, because I'll just make this point. I know a lot of people, when they read this, they see it as a uh-oh passage. Maybe that's a sign that there's a contradiction and Jesus wasn't right and all this stuff. I'll just be honest with you. Nobody in the early days of Christianity, when these things were taking place, ever thought that. It was never considered that. They all considered it to be consistent. What has crept in is because, as I said before, people conflating the two things together have said, oh, maybe Jesus was wrong because those other things he talks about happening have not happened in a generation. And so, just to be clear, that kind of thinking is a relatively new way of interpreting that passage.
And because of the other thing we talked about in how to read the Bible is look at your context. But the other thing is to remember the Bible is for us, but not to us.
Yes.
And so these answers are not answers you should look at and go, when do I see this happening in my world?
True.
This is not about your world. It was about their world, that generation, what they should look for. As I said to the guy in my group when he asked it, when you read something and you think, I never understand what Jesus means by that generation, well, you should start by going, Jesus knew what he was talking about when he said that generation. He meant that generation there.
And the people listening knew what he was talking about.
And he said, some of you all will still be alive.
Yes.
He meant that.
Yeah. And they were. And they also took that as another sign. I mean, if the resurrection wasn't enough, but they also took this as another sign that Jesus was right. He was the Son of God. And so therefore, it built their faith because to them, and again, you got to think about their thought process. They walked into they could not imagine anything greater than the temple. The temple was their greatest achievement, and that was why, of course, in another passage when Jesus makes that statement, someone greater than the temple is here, and they knew he was talking about himself. That was another reason they wanted to kill him,
Right.
because you didn't speak against the temple, and Jesus, makes that sort of a veiled little his statement about when he says, "You tear this temple down, I'll build it up in 3 days." He was again equating his own body
Right.
with the temple, and you know what I'm saying.
Well, I think for them, it ultimately comes to what you were saying of. I do think even though Jesus is giving two answers, he is tying these two things into this idea of there is coming into the way things were.
Yep.
And there's a new way things are, just like we know when Jesus comes back one day, that'll be the end to a different set of things that are, that these things are end up, and which is why I think they end up for people getting conflated, because for people who lived in, and I don't know if we've said this, that it's specifically 70 AD when they destroyed the temple,
It is.
people who lived through that, it was world ending.
Yes.
It was
Oh, yeah.
shattering, because it wasn't just they came in and destroyed the temple. I mean, if you read these things, I remember sitting in class and reading reports that the Romans, but the amount of mutilation they did to bodies, it was beyond crucifixion, the things that they did to the Jewish people. It was traumatic. It was life-changing. It really is not dissimilar to, I just recently heard, I'm sure you guys, because I think we were listening to the same podcast, heard a story about a group of pastors who were out of the country when September 11th happened, and they talked about it felt like the end of the world because you weren't in America, and when this thing happened, that had never been this kind of, and we all, I mean, any of us who lived through it, there had never been this, it seemed like something that could never happen in America, and fundamentally altered the way American life was from that point.
Sure.
That people who were born after it don't remember there not being TSA, or not remembering that you couldn't just go to the airport. I briefly remember coming to pick you up a couple times at the airport pre 9/11, being able to be at the gate.
Yep.
Like I sort of remember that because I was right in the age when that happening. Because I did youth ministry. It is a foreign concept to most young people that we wouldn't be at war at all times. Sure. Like this idea, it is cataclysmic. There is a difference between America pre 9/11 and after 9/11.
Well, and so much so, no one thinks of the Jewish religion now having sacrificial
Animal
systems
sacrifices.
or a temple, because there hasn't been one since AD
that
70. Even though they've been back in Jerusalem, Jesus said this won't be rebuilt. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened.
And so on top of just the actual prophetic nature of it, that Jesus said this is going to happen, and it did, the Christians saw this as a sign of, the new kingdom has come.
Yeah.
God's new covenant is happening. That old thing he was doing through Israel is done. The old covenant is done. Here's the new covenant. This is evidence of it. We're living in what they would refer to as the last days between the destruction of the temple and when Jesus is coming back. And so even though they are two different answers, I can see why they're placed right next, that they're happening in the same conjunction, because they're seeing as these are both what they would call eschatological, would be the word, last days kind of things. This is evidence that Jesus is brought about a new creation, as these old things have passed away, and there's these new things coming.
And when they talked about the last day, they were talking about the last era of God's
History.
time.
Yes, the last days
era-
is from the time Jesus resurrected till the time Jesus
the
comes
last
back.
days have been going on. And so when you look at that passage again, there are two questions, there's two answers. The one that we often see of, that often gets quoted, wars and rumors of wars and all that, and you see it surrounding all that, that's clearly 80-70.
Yes.
And then there's the part at the end, that one's all really clear. When they saw it, they take place. But then at the end, when it gets to the time of his return, Jesus says things like, nobody's going to know. It's going to be like a thief in the night. And, and all of those things that he says about his return in other places are the same. I don't know. You don't know. It's it's not going to be when anybody tells you it's going to happen. That's not when it's not going to happen when they
And
say
he
it.
starts telling them, you need to be ready.
You need to be ready.
Well, people think, like ready tomorrow? No, he just meant live in a way that makes you ready. He says, look up because your
Right.
salvation draws near. Well, again, near, what does
Right.
that mean?
Yeah.
It means anytime.
Yeah, it just means I live in a state of readiness, not fear.
That's
it's
right.
just that I'm ready.
Yep.
And as I've always said to people, everybody's going to have the return of Christ in their lifetime. It just may be your last day. Your last day is the moment you meet Jesus.
Sure.
Jesus' return for you is that moment.
And I would, this is a tangential issue, but I think it's important to bring up here because I hear this a lot. People read passages like this, and they want people like me to say, do you think that this means we are in the last days? And they start asking, because they'll look at things that are going
Right.
on in our current world and say, is that what he was talking about, or is that pointing to this and all that? And what I like to always remind people of is, I said, this generation is no different than the generation before and the generation before, and you just trace it all the way back to the time when the disciples were writing the letters, and they were saying, y'all be ready.
Right.
Y'all be ready. Because we've been in that age for that whole time. There have also been in every one of those generations people who will stand up and try to tell you, I know what this means, and it means this. And they'll start predicting things.
And they're always wrong.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I grew up in a church where I can distinctly remember sitting in the pew listening to the pastor preach on Sunday morning, we will not make it out of the year 1988.
Yeah.
And then I heard some other preachers later saying, we will not make it out of the year 1999. And so it's gone on and on and on and on. And so my advice to people when they say, what about that one? And I say, if that one's like all the other ones, I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Just be ready.
It just doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter.
In the
That's
end,
right.
I don't have to read any signs of the times. Even that phrase is about the original part of the answer. That sign, you can read the signs. It was about the destruction of Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't asked to read any signs because there are no signs that a thief is coming to your house.
True.
There are no signs that happens. The very nature of it is you can't have a sign for a thief that comes in the night.
Did we finish that question?
I think so.
I think we did. All right. Without getting into some more weeds.
Yeah,
that
we can
probably
get into
don't wanna
more
go.
weeds if you want to.
Y'all can ask those questions too, I guess. But I think you see where we're headed. All right. Now, second question and our final question for today is there's a lot of interpretations to this one, so we'll just see what comes out of this. In your opinion, what is the meaning of Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 8? So I guess I should read that.
Go to it.
All right.
Please.
So I pulled that up. I'm going to read Genesis
This
6.
is a giant people passage.
Yeah. So it's an obscure passage, and I'll give them that. So here it is. It says, Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry that he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I'm sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. And then, of course, the story of Noah begins from that point on. So the question is, I've read several different commentaries, and there seems to be a divide between whether or not the sons of God were demons in human form that were attempting to create a super race, or the Nephilites, or the Nephilim in some
X-Men.
whatever, in some of those translations. So their question is, what do we think about that? Can I give them the short answer?
Yeah.
You can.
We don't know.
What I think about, I mean, I'll be 100. I don't think about this very much.
I was going to
neither.
say,
I
I was going to let y'all totally have it because I read that passage and go, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Well, and
I assume so a slightly longer answer would be when I come across passages like this, I assume the thing that we say all the time about reading the Bible, that it is written for you but not to you. I assume that there was an intended original purpose that this was placed in there by the writers, that they were actually addressing something, maybe a literal thing that was taking place. I don't put it past the idea that this could be a literal thing that was happening with some kind of spiritual heavenly creature and human creatures commingling. But it could also be something a little more metaphorical that's trying to explain something that's going on in the world, because we know so much of early Genesis is poetry, so it could be something a little more poetic about what's going on. But because it's not written to me, I assume nothing in this will affect whether Jesus is the risen Son of God or not.
Nor help me love my neighbor.
That's what I mean. Or
God.
help me to better understand what His purpose for me in my daily life is. So I don't think about it a ton. I know that's not helpful.
No.
And I don't want to then downplay the person that has spent time on. I think good for you if this really interests you. I bet there are people that have spent time on this. I just haven't. I have not spent any time on this particular passage of Scripture at all.
Well, and I think from the question that you did ask us, the person who wrote this in, you've done some research on it, and you are correct, because I did a little quick looking into it, because I have looked at it before, and you're right. It depends on what scholar you read. They have different interpretations of this, and yes, there are some scholars who think that this is some type of a supernatural commingling with the physical world that was taking place here. There are others that believe that this is like a precursor to the Canaanites, who later on in the Old Testament became like the worst civilization of all time ever.
Well, and when the Israelites first meet them, say they look like giants.
Yes, and they believe, and that's the reason why
Right.
this is tied back to this passage. And then I read some funny stuff that some people say, that whole idea of being giants, they said, well, the archaeological evidence says that they might have been 6'6".
Right, that's right.
Right.
But in that context, they
That would've
seem
been
that
like a
way.
giant.
Then, of course, there are other scholars that say, no, we've seen some other evidence, and that's not the case. So you've got what's called an in-house debate on this, what that means is there are Christians who are all Christians who fully take the Bible seriously, who have different opinions on this. But the good thing about this particular issue is that, like Ed, I think, just said, this has no bearing on what really truly matters about the Bible.
Right. I don't know any Christian doctrine at all, even a minor one or a secondary one anywhere, that is built on this passage.
That's right.
So, there are things in the Bible that, frankly, I don't understand.
That's right.
And there are things in the Bible I frankly don't like.
Right.
They bother me when I read them.
It's a sign that it's true, though.
Well, probably.
Because my point is, if I ever read the Bible and I never find anything that offends me, then I'm probably not reading it right.
Well, all I'll say is if you read any ancient history, which I do enjoy ancient history, you can't read much about the history of human beings and go, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people that really did that.
Yeah.
There are people that really have done horrible, terrible things that disgust me.
Yes.
Including people that aren't that far back ancestry to me.
Yeah.
They just go, man, that's shameful and unimaginable. So I don't understand all of it, but I don't know any doctrine that any Jewish part of Judaism is based on. The Jews accept the 39 books of the Old Testament. Islam accepts the 39 books of the Old Testament. I don't think anything they believe is based on that particular There are none of us that base anything on it. It's in there. I accept it. It meant something to those original people. They probably understood exactly what it meant.
Sure.
It was written to them,
Yes.
not to me. I don't understand it, but that has more to do with I haven't yet been able to get in their culture enough to understand what it meant.
Well, and I do think if you understand at least particularly the book of Genesis, so much of what the book of Genesis is doing is setting up themes early on that Noah is solving and Abraham is solving. And so you have these. And so I had never heard until you said the thing about the Canaanites, but I could even see that as being understood, because sometimes we read these things, and I think sometimes people read history this way, as if people are writing it down as it's happening. Like, there's a giant, and I just watched the sons of God and the woman make a baby, so here we go, and I wrote it down. It's all happening post fact, and there's an interpretive nature to it. They're explaining, because this happened, then this thing happened, and the fact that this leads to Noah, and we know the point of Noah is God regrets. He goes, I feel sorry. You even read that thing. I feel sorry that I made human beings. This whole thing, what was that?
And we're way off track.
This was all. It's showing everything went to chaos. That at the beginning of Genesis, God is ordering the world. If there's chaos on the waters, God's bringing the chaos into order, and then everything goes back to chaos. The people start doing this crazy stuff.
I would say there's one part of that when you were saying it, I hadn't thought of it. That statement that God regrets that he had made the whole thing.
Yes.
There are parts of some people I know that believe everything going on, this is exactly what God wanted. You ought to reread that one statement.
I'll take
You ought to
it.
just.
Now don't
you
get
just,
in them
I'm
weeds.
just saying.
Well, I'll take it.
I'd say, is that in the weeds? That
No.
just feels
I'll
like
tell you
right
this-
in the heart of it.
I'll
That's
tell
the
you
only
this-
part of that I really understand.
I'm kidding.
I read that when I was a kid, and it has haunted me ever since. The idea that God felt sorry that he did something, and that the thing he felt sorry about doing was that humanity. He looks and he goes, oh, man, this is a mess, guys. This is a mess. But I'll tell you this. As a parent, there are times I've walked in
Yes.
watching my kids fight, and I walk in and I go, oh, man, this is a mess. Let me just shut the door and walk back to my
Well,
back to
I
my
have
office.
I know, and you're one of my kids.
Yeah.
There have been times where I go, Becky, remember when it was just us?
What?
remember those days?
So the Father, Son, Holy Spirit are having that conversation.
And then your older brother he used to say to me a lot when he was at
Yeah.
10 or 11, he'd go, I liked it better when it was just the three of us. Me, you, and Mom.
Every older child thinks that. As an older brother, I can tell you.
I just took all 4 of my kids on vacation, and one of them kept me up for 10 of those 10 hours we were supposed to be sleeping. I only got 1 hour of sleep the first one, and I walked over to my wife and I said, why do we have 4 kids? And I said, why do we have 4 kids? And then you remember, oh, I love these kids.
And that's what God did.
And that is what God
He
does.
goes, oh, okay, this didn't work. We're still on track.
Yes.
It just
If
didn't-
that one bothers you, wait till you get to Moses having to have a conversation to God and be like, remember you love us.
right.
Remember you love us. He's like,
Oh,
how about
yeah.
how about I find 50 people that he's like, well, okay. But if you
Okay.
can't find 50, what about 40?
And he has to say to
Okay,
God
all
at
right.
another point, now, if you destroy us all now, what will the Egyptians say? I mean,
You're gonna have a bad
you're going to look really bad to them.
And then he kind of goes to Moses. You're right.
You know what? You got me on that one, Moses.
It's like,
I hadn't
really?
thought about that. He's like
that's
holding the big meteor up, and he's like, oh, Moses.
I feel like we might be freaking a few people out.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a whole nother conversation about God and condescension
Oh, yeah.
and all of that kind of stuff.
You should send a question about what we just talked about. Explain the last 10 minutes of that podcast.
What in the world is that?
And the part about the Braves at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, I would say to you who asked the question, I do know there are 2 scholars who've written on this, and they come from completely different.
So don't read just one.
No, and we've mentioned them on this podcast. There's a guy named Michael Heiser who's got a lot written on this. He has one take on it. Greg Boyd, who is from another camp, and they've actually got a little bit of a dialogue that they had several years ago
About this
online
passage?
about this passage,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's really good. And they're cool guys so they can talk and not hate each other, and
still believe each other's wrong.
well, of course,
Yeah.
and still believe each other's going to heaven.
Yeah, that's right. And love each other.
And that's right. So if you're interested in that, Michael Heiser, Greg Boyd, they can give you both sides. And you know what? You can choose which side you come down on. And guess what? You're all good.
And just remember, no matter which side you come down on, the still thing you have to focus on is loving God and loving people,
Yep.
not on what happened with giant people somewhere
Yes.
that aren't with you.
And unless you meet a giant,
You know, giant
and then you're
person,
going to
then
be
you're-
called to love
You're
them.
going to need to love that
You're going to be to
person, too.
love them just like Jesus loved you. That's the only way that applies to you. So there you go.
Shaq, come on this podcast
Boom.
Oh.
and bring a pop.
Bring a Shaq-a-roni.
Bring a Shaq-a-roni.
I'll take it. All right. We are done today,
Bring Charles
guys.
Barkley with you. I
That
love
is-
Charles Barkley.
He'd be better on this podcast than we would. So that's it. All right, that's it for this week. We got one question next week. It's going to take us the entire podcast, but it is a doozy. So make sure you come back.
doozy.
It's a great question.
Doozy episode coming up.
That's
Double
right.
doozy for
Just
Great
a one
American
doozy.
Cookie.
Just a one doozy, but it's a good question.
One doozy.
So come back next week. See you guys.